That evening, I came home earlier than usual. Outside, the air was thick with humidity, a clear sign that a storm was brewing. As I stepped inside, an unsettling silence greeted me. The familiar sounds of Maya bustling about downstairs were noticeably absent. My mind was still reeling from a grueling day at work, filled with endless deadlines, back-to-back meetings, and the relentless pressure that seemed to suffocate me. All I longed for was to cross that threshold, crack open a cold beer, and sink into the comfort of the couch. I thought maybe I'd catch a moment of peace before Maya launched into her usual recounting of her day's trivialities. Yet, the instant I walked through the door, a sense of foreboding washed over me. It wasn't immediately apparent, just a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The air felt different, almost oppressive, wrapping around me as I paused in the entryway, struggling to discern what had changed. There was no television humming in the background, no clatter of dishes in the sink, and no footsteps coming to greet me, just a disconcerting quiet. I found myself moving toward the stairs, though I couldn't explain what compelled me to ascend. Perhaps it was instinct. Perhaps it was some form of intuition. Whatever it was, something deep inside me nudged me to pursue the strange stillness that loomed as I approached the top. I slowed my steps, trying to make as little noise as possible. Then it hit me, a sound that caused me to freeze in place. A muffled groan, soft yet undeniable. I didn't want to accept it. I fought against the reality that my instincts were screaming at me. For a heartbeat, I was caught between disbelief and anger, my heart pounding so fiercely it felt like it might shatter. But I remained paralyzed. I couldn't bring myself to move. Not yet. Another moan followed, louder this time, accompanied by unmistakable sounds of movement. It was coming from the bedroom, our bedroom. I edged closer, the carpet muffling my footsteps as I reached the door, which stood slightly ajar. Just enough for me to catch a reflection in the mirror on the opposite wall. And there they were, entwined on the bed I had shared with Maya for years. She was underneath him, her cheeks flushed and lost in ecstasy, completely oblivious to my presence. And to him. Lucas, my so-called best friend. The man who had stood by my side at our wedding, raised a glass to our happiness, who had been a part of my life for as long as I could remember. He loomed over her, pressing into her in a way that churned my stomach. The betrayal struck me like a brutal punch to the gut, raw and savage. I felt suffocated. My mind raced, yet I didn't make a sound. I just stood there, a helpless observer. Every fiber of my being screamed to burst in, to rip them apart, and make them pay for their betrayal. I wanted to, but I held back. My fists tightened, knuckles turning white as I fought the overpowering urge to kick down the door, smash his face, and demand answers from Maya. Demand that she explain how she could destroy everything we'd built together for a fleeting moment of cheap thrill with the one person I had once considered my brother. But no, that would be too simple, too hasty. I refused to give them the satisfaction of witnessing my heartbreak. Instead, I took a step back, retreating down the stairs as quietly as I had entered. Each step felt heavier than the last, my mind swirling with fury, betrayal, and something colder, determination. I wasn't going to confront them. Not now. Not like this. There was a twisted satisfaction in the plan forming in my mind. Once I reached the bottom of the stairs, I slipped out the front door, closing it gently behind me. The night had fallen, and the first drops of rain began to fall. But I barely noticed as I stumbled to my car, my mind in a daze. Each breath I took was infused with seething anger. As I sat behind the wheel, I gripped the steering wheel so tightly that I thought it might snap. The image of them together seared into my mind, her face radiating pleasure, his body hovering over hers as if he had every right to be there. This kind of betrayal doesn't just break trust. It annihilates it, leaving a chasm where love once thrived. But I wouldn't let this spiral into blind, raging fury. No, I would give them time. Time to think they had escaped unscathed. Time to believe I was completely oblivious. Maya, sweet, deceitful Maya, would continue her act, pretending to be the devoted wife, cooking my meals, kissing me goodnight. Meanwhile, I'd sit there, fully aware of her secret rendezvous with him. And Lucas? He would act as if nothing were amiss, as if he weren't entwined with the one person he should never have touched. They thought they were clever, hiding their affair from me, but I was about to demonstrate what true cleverness looked like. My plan unfurled slowly, yet with a clarity that surprised even me. I wasn't merely going to expose them. I intended to dismantle their lives, piece by piece. I would strip away everything that mattered to them, and the beauty of it was they wouldn't see it coming. By the time they grasped what I had orchestrated, it would be far too late. And Lucas? He had no clue how personal this was about to become. He cherished his wife, Sophie, like a trophy, always flaunting his little family. Well, if he wanted to destroy mine, it was only fitting that I dismantled his in return. I would take Sophie from him, not just away from him, but in the most intimate way possible. I would make her mine, just as he had done with Maya. But unlike him, I wouldn't rush it. This wasn't about a fleeting affair. No, this was about power, control, revenge. I fired up the car, the engine roaring to life as the rain began to pour, drumming against the windshield. My grip on the wheel eased slightly, a cold smile creeping onto my face. This wasn't the end of my marriage. It was just the beginning of their demise, and I planned to relish every single moment of it. That night, I meandered through the rain-soaked streets, letting the rhythmic drumming of raindrops against the windshield drown out the tempest brewing inside me. My anger still simmered beneath the surface, but it had morphed into something colder, sharper, more focused. The shock of discovering Maya and Lucas together had faded, replaced by a crystal-clear, calculated resolve. Revenge, true, deep-seated revenge, couldn't be rushed. It wasn't something to be executed in a fit of blind rage that would leave me looking like the fool they believed I was. No, I wanted to dismantle both of them piece by piece until they stood amid the wreckage of their lives. To accomplish that, I needed to start with Lucas. I parked in a dimly lit lot, the rain hammering down on the car as I sat, my thoughts racing like a runaway freight train. Lucas had always been arrogant, secure in his belief that he could take what was mine without facing any repercussions. He had no idea how exposed he truly was. To him, I was just a gullible pushover, oblivious to everything. Little did he know how intimately I understood his life, his weaknesses, and yes, his wife, Sophie. Sophie was the key to my strategy. Lucas and Sophie had been an inseparable pair forever, embodying that picture-perfect suburban life. A charming home, a couple of kids, and the quintessential white picket fence. He paraded their ideal life at every opportunity, bragging about his accomplishments like a peacock showing off its feathers. What better way to strike at him than to take away the one thing he treasured the most? But this wouldn't be a superficial conquest where I simply seduced her and bragged about it afterward. No, it had to be far more profound, more intimate. I didn't just want to sleep with Sophie. I intended to wrest her from him in the most gut-wrenching way possible. I would make her fall for me, make her question everything she thought she knew about Lucas. Ultimately, she would lose faith in him and choose me, not out of mere lust, but from a place of authentic love. When that moment came, I would allow Lucas to witness as everything he held dear crumbled around him. What made this scheme so exquisite was how effortless it would be. I understood Sophie's insecurities, her fears, and her hidden longings. She wasn't like Maya. Sophie was more reserved, thoughtful, with a delicate spirit that Lucas never truly valued. To him, she was merely another trophy, something to flaunt at family gatherings or in front of friends. But I saw through that facade. I had observed the cracks in their relationship long before this moment. I had recognized her vulnerability, and now I was ready to exploit it. As I glanced at my phone, I debated whether tonight should be the night I made my first move. But no, patience was crucial. I couldn't be too forward or act impulsively. I needed to set the stage with precision. So, I drove home, slipping back into my role as the unsuspecting husband. Maya had no idea of my newfound awareness, and that ignorance was my greatest weapon. Upon entering the house, I could hear Maya humming softly upstairs, preparing for bed. Each note felt like a dagger, a reminder of her betrayal. I kept my expression neutral as I moved through the kitchen, pouring myself a drink. A moment later, she appeared at the bottom of the stairs, wearing one of my old, faded t-shirts, the kind she always loved to sleep in. It used to seem sweet, but now it felt like a mockery. "You're home late," she remarked casually, filling a glass with water. The nonchalance in her voice sent a chill down my spine, as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just shattered my trust in our bed. The audacity was almost impressive. "Yeah," I replied, maintaining a calm tone. "Got caught up at work." She came closer, kissing my cheek as if everything was perfectly normal. "I missed you today." I forced a cold smile, the kind that had become my mask. "I missed you too." The lies slipped from my lips effortlessly, now as natural as breathing. As she turned to head back upstairs, I watched her retreat, pondering how long she thought she could keep up this facade. But I wasn't ready to confront her yet. Not until my plan was fully in place. She and Lucas believed they were safe, convinced they could continue their affair in secrecy. Little did they know, the ground beneath them was already beginning to shift. The next day, I set my plan into motion. I reached out to Sophie, framing it as a casual check-in, something any friend would do. We had known each other for years, so a little friendly banter wouldn't raise any red flags. I sent her a simple message, asking how she was doing and if she wanted to grab coffee. Her reply came almost instantly, likely eager for a distraction from whatever hollow pretense of a relationship she had left with Lucas. Within a few days, we arranged to meet for coffee. This was nothing out of the ordinary. Lucas and I were close, and the four of us had spent plenty of time together over the years. But this time was different. This was a calculated maneuver. We chose a quiet cafe in town, the type of place where patrons rarely noticed who sat at which table. Sophie looked drained, the burdens of her life etched on her face. When our eyes met, she offered a smile that felt forced, lacking the spark that used to light up her expressions. "Thanks for meeting me," I said, aiming for a casual tone. "It's been ages since we've had a chance to catch up." "Yeah, it really has," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Things have been really hectic." I didn't need her to elaborate. I understood all too well what she meant. Lucas, the so-called ideal husband, was anything but. I gently coaxed her to share more, asking about the kids, her art studio, all while scrutinizing her every reaction, capturing the subtle changes in her demeanor and the flickers of doubt that danced across her features. Then the conversation shifted to more personal territory, and I felt I had her right where I wanted her. "I've been feeling really overwhelmed lately," she admitted, her gaze dropping to the table as if the weight of her words was too heavy to bear. "It feels like Lucas and I are just drifting apart. We're not connecting anymore." I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice to convey sincerity. "I'm truly sorry to hear that, Sophie. You deserve so much more than this." Her eyes searched mine, seeking reassurance, validation, perhaps. I provided it, fully aware of what she needed. "You've always been such a good friend," she said, relief evident in her tone. "I don't know what I'd do without you." I smiled, the warmth in my expression completely feigned. "You're not alone. I'm always here if you need someone to lean on." She returned my smile, but it was tinged with sorrow, a recognition that her seemingly perfect life was beginning to unravel. And that was exactly what I wanted. My goal was to plant seeds of doubt in her mind, to make her question everything she thought she knew about her life and marriage. That was my mission. As I left the cafe that afternoon, a rush of triumph surged within me. Everything was aligning beautifully, one calculated move after another. Lucas was blissfully unaware that the woman he had betrayed me with would soon be the very reason for his downfall. Walking back to my car, the rain drizzled softly, creating a perfect backdrop for the storm brewing inside me. This was merely the beginning. The day after my meeting with Sophie, I felt an exhilarating thrill bubbling beneath the calm facade I maintained. The slow burn of revenge had ignited, and I was completely in. Lucas remained oblivious to the trap tightening around him, while Sophie was beginning to see me as more than just her husband's friend. It was subtle, but that was exactly how I wanted it for now. She needed to trust me, to perceive me as someone who understood her in ways Lucas never could. Meanwhile, Maya continued to play her part, blissfully unaware of the shifting dynamics. She inundated me with trivial texts throughout the day, mindless messages about grocery lists or weekend plans, while I remained acutely aware of where her thoughts wandered when I wasn't around. She assumed I was oblivious, that I hadn't caught on to the twisted game she and Lucas were playing. But soon, she would discover just how mistaken she truly was. It was a Thursday evening, about a week after my coffee date with Sophie, when I decided it was time to ramp up my plan. I knew Lucas would be tied up at work late, engrossed in a significant project he had mentioned, an ideal cover for his extracurricular activities. But tonight, my focus was solely on Sophie. I drove toward their house, my excuse firmly established in my mind. I would drop by unexpectedly, slipping into the role of the concerned friend. Sophie had confided in me about her feelings of neglect during our last conversation. I knew she would appreciate the visit, perhaps even welcome the company. As I pulled up to their two-story home, the rain began to pour, the streetlights casting a warm glow on the slick pavement. Through the living room window, I caught a glimpse of the flickering television, creating a cozy ambience that felt like a cruel irony. It was almost too easy. I knocked on the door, ensuring I appeared casual and relaxed. A moment later, Sophie opened the door, genuine surprise evident in her eyes. "Oh, hey!" she exclaimed, stepping aside to let me in. "I didn't expect to see you," she added, her surprise painting her tone with sincerity. I smiled nonchalantly, shaking off the rain from my jacket. "Yeah, I thought I'd drop by and see how you were doing. Just happened to be in the area." It was a complete fabrication. I hadn't been anywhere near their neighborhood, but the delight in her eyes showed she didn't mind. She seemed genuinely happy to see me, blissfully unaware of the motives behind my visit. "Lucas isn't home right now," she mentioned, a hint of regret lacing her voice. "I know," I replied, keeping my tone light and easygoing. "I'm here for you." The words surprised her, and I noticed a flicker of uncertainty cross her features. She quickly masked it, offering a tentative smile as she led me into the living room. "Can I get you something to drink?" she asked, her voice light but tinged with nervousness. "Wine would be great," I said, settling into the couch as she moved to the kitchen. I could hear the clinking of glasses and the soft hum of the refrigerator door opening and closing. When she returned, she handed me a glass of red and took a seat beside me, closer than usual. "How are you holding up?" I asked, lowering my voice to create an intimate atmosphere, a facade of genuine concern. Sophie sighed heavily, her eyes glued to her glass. "It's been really challenging," she admitted. "Lucas has been incredibly distant, and honestly, I feel lost. Sometimes it's as if he doesn't care at all." I nodded, playing the part of the concerned friend. "You're justified in feeling that way," I replied, ensuring my tone was warm and supportive. "You know how Lucas can be. He often overlooks what he is right in front of him." She looked up, searching my eyes for comfort. "You've always treated us with kindness," she said softly. "I truly don't know what I would do without friends like you." I let her words settle, recognizing their weight in the silence between us. Then I reached out, my hand resting gently on her knee. "You deserve so much more than what you're getting, Sophie," I murmured, my voice sincere and gentle. "You need someone who truly appreciates you." Her breath caught and she didn't pull away. Instead, she remained, her gaze fixed on me, the uncertainty in her eyes starting to deepen into something more significant. The atmosphere thickened with tension, and the distance between us began to vanish. "I just don't know what to do," she whispered, her voice quaking slightly. "I can help with that," I replied, leaning in just enough to signal my intentions without crossing that delicate line. "At least not yet. You deserve far better than what Lucas offers, and you know that deep down." Her gaze dropped to my hand on her knee, and I could see the conflict raging within her. She was torn between her loyalty to her husband and the undeniable attraction of something she craved, something Lucas clearly wasn't providing. "I shouldn't," she began, but I gently interrupted, my tone soothing and coaxing. I'm not asking for anything, Sophie. I'm simply speaking the truth. She hesitated, her breath shallow, and for a fleeting moment, I feared she might withdraw. But then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, she leaned closer, her lips parting just a fraction, her eyelids fluttering shut. It would have been so easy to kiss her then, to take that final step. But not yet. This wasn't about rushing. It was about planting the seeds of desire and doubt, letting her come to me when she was ready. That's where the real power lay, in making her want it. I leaned back slightly, creating a little distance between us, observing the confusion flickering across her features. I should probably head out, I said nonchalantly, allowing just enough tension to linger in the air to keep her on edge. Sophie blinked, as if awakening from a dream. Yeah, maybe that's a good idea, she murmured. I stood up, placing my glass on the coffee table with exaggerated slowness. We'll talk soon, I said, offering a smile that hinted at unspoken promises and secrets. And remember, I'm always here for you. As I exited her house, I could sense her gaze lingering on me, the gravity of our conversation still heavy in the air. She was teetering on the edge now, caught between loyalty and temptation. All she needed was a gentle push, and I would be there to catch her when she fell. By the time I reached my car, the rain had ceased, leaving the air cool and damp. I paused for a moment, savoring the intoxicating feeling of control, fully aware that my plan was progressing flawlessly. Lucas had taken Maya from me, my wife, my life, but he was blissfully unaware that I was orchestrating a similar downfall for him, only with greater precision. When everything settled, he wouldn't just lose Sophie. He would lose everything he held dear. But for now, I was content to wait, letting the tension simmer, allowing the betrayal to brew just beneath the surface until it was ready to explode. The following days unfolded in a strange calm that had become my new normal. Maya maintained her charade, sending sweet but empty messages, pretending to be the devoted wife while sneaking off to meet Lucas. They had grown reckless, perhaps too confident that I wouldn't catch on. Watching her glide through our home, blissfully unaware of the impending collapse of her carefully constructed facade, nearly made me laugh. Yet I could feel the cracks widening. Their illusion wouldn't hold for long. For now, though, I played my part, letting her think I was oblivious. In reality, I amplified my attentiveness, showering her with affection, compliments, and spontaneous outings. If she noticed the sudden change in my demeanor, she kept it to herself. She was likely too caught up in her affair to recognize my performance. It was the perfect distraction, keeping her off balance. But Sophie? She was my true focus now. Since that fateful night, I sensed a shift in her. She had started reaching out to me more frequently. She confided in me, sharing her worries and frustrations in ways that felt increasingly intimate. Each time she leaned on me emotionally, I pulled her further from Lucas, widening the rift between them that he couldn't even perceive. By the end of the week, I was poised to escalate my plans. I had practiced patience, careful not to overreach, but the timing was finally right. Lucas was due to leave town for a work conference, a detail he had boasted about just days earlier. It was almost amusing how clueless he was, blissfully unaware that his absence would create the perfect opportunity for me to pursue my intentions with Sophie. On Friday evening, I shot her a text. Nothing too suggestive, just a simple, "How are you holding up? Want some company?" Her response was swift. She was home alone and definitely in need of a distraction. I wasted no time. The drive over was quick, but my heart raced with excitement. The rain had stopped for the evening, leaving the streets slick and shimmering under the streetlights. The cool air carried the scent of wet asphalt and something else, a sense of inevitability. Tonight, I would take things a step further. As I pulled into the driveway, Sophie welcomed me with a smile that carried the weight of fatigue. "Thanks for coming," she said quietly, stepping aside to let me inside. "This week has dragged on forever." Her weariness was palpable, a heavy cloud that hung over her. It was clear that Lucas's absence had drained her, leaving her looking like someone grappling with an unbearable load. This was exactly the situation I had hoped for. "You know I'm always here for you," I assured her, flashing a warm smile that had become instinctive. Once we were settled in the softly lit living room, the atmosphere turned inviting, wrapping us in comfort. Sophie poured us both a glass of wine, a casual yet charged gesture in the quiet stillness. I took a seat beside her on the couch, positioned close enough for her to feel my presence, yet just far enough to respect her space. Not yet. Initially, our conversation revolved around trivial matters: work, the kids, the little details that made up her day-to-day life. But as the wine flowed and the evening wore on, the mood began to shift. I sensed her defenses starting to crumble, the vulnerability I had cultivated in her rising to the surface. "I just don't know how much longer I can keep pretending everything is fine," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Lucas is hardly ever around, and when he is, it feels like he's just going through the motions. I feel like I'm losing him. Or maybe I already have." Her words hung in the air, heavy with emotion. This was the moment I had been waiting for, a fracture in her armor that I could slip through. I reached out, my hand resting gently on hers, my touch both tender and intentional. "You haven't lost him yet, Sophie," I said softly. "But maybe it's time to let go of what isn't really there anymore. You deserve more than being an afterthought in your own life." She met my gaze, her eyes wide with uncertainty. "I don't know what to do," she whispered, desperation tinging her voice. "I've tried everything to make it work. I just want him to change. But I feel so alone," she admitted, her voice shaking. "You're not alone," I replied, my tone steady and comforting. "I'm here for you. I've always been." Then, without hesitation, she leaned in, her lips brushing against mine tentatively, as if exploring a new territory she never expected to enter. I kissed her back, savoring the moment just long enough before pulling away, my breath calm and steady, as though this was how it was always meant to happen. Her eyes widened, surprise flooding her features. I shouldn't have done that," she stammered, instinctively pulling back and covering her mouth with her hand. "I'm so sorry." I shook my head gently, my voice soothing. "No need to apologize. You haven't done anything wrong." I could see the confusion and guilt swirling in her expression, the storm of emotions threatening to consume her. "But what about Lucas?" she asked, her voice trembling with uncertainty. "Lucas isn't here, Sophie," I replied, finishing her thought. "And even if he were, would he even notice what you're feeling right now?" Her silence confirmed what I suspected. She had crossed a line, and deep down she recognized it. But the reality was that she didn't regret it. Not truly. She was caught between the guilt of betrayal and the exhilarating relief of feeling something genuine again. "I don't know what I'm doing," she admitted, tears welling in her eyes. "I just feel so lost." I took her hand, squeezing it gently. "You're not lost. You're starting to see things as they are." The silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken truths. She was at a crossroads, caught between the life she had always known and the tantalizing possibility of something new, something that could fill the void left by Lucas. And I was right there, ready to catch her when she fell. This time, when she leaned in, there was no hesitation. Her kiss was filled with urgency, a quiet desperation that had been building for far too long. I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her closer, feeling the warmth radiate from her as the weight of our decisions melted away. In that moment, neither of us thought of Lucas, and I wasn't thinking of Maya. The kisses deepened, transitioning from gentle pecks to a slow, deliberate exploration. My hands found their way to her waist, pulling her closer as hers trailed up my chest, gripping my shirt as if anchoring herself in the reality of what we were doing. Sophie pulled back slightly, breathless, her eyes dark with conflicting desires. "I don't know if this is right," she started. But I silenced her with another kiss, slow and tender, allowing her to feel the safety of my touch. "We're already here, Sophie." Her hesitation melted away as she kissed me again, deeper this time. I felt her barriers dissolve as she surrendered to the moment. We moved together in perfect rhythm, neither of us rushing, but both acutely aware of the inevitable. As I kissed the delicate curve of her neck, I felt her body arch toward mine, her breath hitching in her throat. My hands slipped beneath her shirt, exploring the softness of her skin along her lower back. When we finally made our way to the bedroom, the tension that had built between us snapped, giving way to something that had been simmering for far too long. An unspoken understanding filled the air. Whatever guilt or hesitation we had felt was washed away. The hours that followed blurred into a whirlwind of stolen moments and whispered secrets, our hands and lips exploring the familiar yet forbidden territory. We began slowly, savoring each caress, each lingering touch. But as the night wore on, passion eclipsed all restraint, and we surrendered completely, leaving nothing unsaid or undone. When it was over, we lay entwined in the stillness, the room cloaked in darkness, illuminated only by the sound of our breathing gradually returning to normal. Sophie rested her head on my chest, her fingers tracing delicate patterns along my arm. "I never thought I'd do something like this," she murmured, her voice thick with exhaustion yet laced with relief. I didn't respond. I simply held her close, my fingers weaving through her hair as I stared at the ceiling. I could feel the change within her, the realization that she had crossed a threshold she could never return from. And a part of me reveled in it. Sophie had been trapped in her marriage for far too long, and now she was mine. As Sophie slipped into sleep, a familiar sense of triumph surged within me. This wasn't merely about the physical intimacy we'd shared, though that was certainly a part of it. No, this was about mastery, about outmaneuvering Lucas in a way he'd never see coming. The beauty of this situation was that Sophie would remain blissfully ignorant of my deeper intentions. To her, this was a genuine connection, a moment of passion ignited by her feelings of neglect and isolation. The weeks that followed unfolded like a slow, calculated descent into darkness. I kept the momentum going, skillfully weaving my manipulation of Maya and Lucas while nurturing my bond with Sophie. She was completely captivated now, and with every text, every brush of my hand, I drew her further into my orbit. About 3 weeks later, we found ourselves at yet another dinner party. It was a small, casual gathering, an evening that once would have felt perfectly ordinary. But normal was a distant memory now, especially after everything that had happened between us. Lucas and Maya were there, as usual, pretending their affair was a well-guarded secret. They laughed and mingled with our friends as if they weren't betraying those who cared about them. Their charade was convincing, I had to admit that, but tonight wasn't about them. Tonight was focused on Sophie. As we mingled, the atmosphere buzzed with light chatter and laughter. I kept close to Sophie, careful to avoid raising any suspicions. Before long, she found a moment to pull me aside. She gestured toward the kitchen, her face pale and her eyes wide, reflecting an emotion I couldn't quite place. Perhaps fear or something deeper still. Intrigued, I followed her as we slipped away from the crowd. As the kitchen door swung shut behind us, the laughter and chatter faded into the background. My hands trembled slightly as she turned to face me, her gaze darting away, nervously twisting the hem of her shirt. "What's wrong?" I asked, keeping my voice calm and steady. An undeniable tension radiated from her. She took a deep breath, her lips quivering as she finally met my eyes. I don't know how to say this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Just say it," I encouraged, stepping closer, my mind racing with possibilities. I sensed her anxiety mounting, her chest rising and falling rapidly as she struggled to find the right words. "I'm pregnant," she blurted, the words hitting me like a sledgehammer. For a moment I was struck dumb. The shock of her revelation slammed into me, leaving me reeling. Pregnant, Sophie was pregnant. And it wasn't Lucas's child. I swallowed hard, fighting to maintain my composure as a whirlwind of thoughts swirled in my head. This was not part of the plan. "Are you certain?" I asked, my voice low and careful, searching her eyes for any sign of doubt. She nodded, biting her lip, tears glistening in her eyes. "I've taken several tests. It's real." A heavy silence enveloped us as we processed the gravity of her statement. She was pregnant with my child, conceived amidst this tangled web of deceit. And Lucas, he was blissfully unaware that the woman he believed was his would soon carry a child that wasn't his. What about Lucas? I asked, maintaining my calm tone, though I felt a knot tightening in my chest. No, she whispered, shaking her head. He doesn't know anything. I haven't told him. I just can't bring myself to hurt him. But he's been hurting you for years. I pressed, my voice low but intense. He deserves to know the truth, Sophie. You deserve to be free from him. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she shook her head. I can't tell him. I can't. I don't know how he'll react. I stepped closer, placing my hands firmly on her shoulders to make sure she was focused on me. Listen, this is our moment, Sophie. He's not the man you need anymore. You know it. He's been neglecting you, taking you for granted while you've been left to deal with everything on your own. But you're not alone anymore. You have me. She looked up at me, the weight of my words beginning to sink in. I don't know if I can handle this, she murmured, her voice trembling. You can, I insisted. You don't have to face this alone. You owe him nothing. She hesitated, biting her lip as tears continued to flow, but I noticed a change in her demeanor. A dawning realization that everything was shifting, whether she was ready for it or not. I'm scared, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. I cupped her face in my hands, gently wiping her tears away with my thumb. You don't have to be scared. I'm here for you. We'll navigate this together. The gravity of the situation enveloped us as we stood there in the quiet kitchen, the sounds of the party continuing just outside the door. Sophie was pregnant with my child, and Lucas remained completely oblivious. The irony hit me hard. He had taken my wife, and now I had taken something far more precious from him. The pressing question loomed. What would happen next? We couldn't keep this secret forever. Eventually, the truth would emerge. And when it did, the fallout would be catastrophic. But that was exactly what I craved. I wanted Lucas to feel the full weight of his choices, to watch as everything he held dear crumbled. Sophie inhaled deeply, steadying herself, her hands resting protectively on her abdomen, a gesture that spoke volumes about her evolving understanding of our reality. We'll figure it out, I reassured her, my voice firm yet gentle. She nodded, her determination hardening as she wiped away her last tears. Okay. We both understood there was no turning back. Everything had changed, and soon everyone would know. But for now, we would keep this secret a little longer, allowing the tension to build until it reached a breaking point. As we rejoined the gathering, Lucas's laughter echoed in the room, and Maya's bright smile shone beside him. They had no idea their carefully constructed world was on the verge of collapse, that in just a few months, everything would shatter irreparably. I caught Sophie's gaze as she looked at Lucas and then back to me. Fear flickered in her eyes, but so did a darker resolve. This was no longer simply about betrayal. It was about the reckoning that awaited us all. It was only a matter of time before the truth erupted, leaving devastation in its wake. And when that moment arrived, I would stand amidst the ashes, watching as everything they cherished burned away. Buckle up, because this story is about to take a much darker twist. Trust me, the next chapter will make this one look like a mere prelude.